Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and this is the Keto Made Simple podcast. I'm hosting a free diabetes lab workshop on April 29. If you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, this lab workshop will show you the key lab tests to assess your metabolic health. What you need to look at besides fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C, what triglycerides are, and why they're essential to measure, how a low-carb diet can help to reverse type 2 diabetes. Register now to make sure you don't miss it. I've added the link in the description, or you can go to our website at adaptyourlifeacademy.com.
Good. Well, welcome again to a Wednesday live with time for some questions. I think I have a couple that were sent in that I'll get to in just a minute. And it's amazing that it's already April. The clinic is really busy. If you want to come visit me at Duke, it may take a little while. Or you call and there's a cancellation and you get in the next day. That happened several times recently. And so you never know if there is someone else who is unable to make it and you have flexibility in the schedule, your schedule. It doesn't necessarily, you're not going to have to necessarily wait a long time. If you sign up for an appointment and there's a cancellation, literally this week, someone came in, called, and got in the next day. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the clinic because, you know, my background is that I didn't create the keto low-carb diet. I borrowed out of my curiosity, seeing two patients lose weight in front of me in my clinic years ago, I was curious and followed just the trail, followed the crumbs to people who had been doing it for a long time. So I learned a lot from Dr. Atkins, Dr. Eads, Dr. Rosedale. These were doctors who had worked out rather simple systems using low-carb diets in their practice, in their clinical practice, which is an important thing to remember. There are a lot of people who are expounding their great wisdom, I'm just kidding, with very little clinical practice experience. That's why you'll hear me give greater value to those who have current or past experience using low-carb keto diets, just because it is so personalized and the issues that arise can be just very different, even over a period of years. Compared to 5 years ago, the questions I get about all of the keto junk foods would not have happened, right? So the keto ice cream brand that's out there is not keto friendly. If you're sensitive to carbs, you want to look at total carbs, not net. And so these keto foods that are out there, even if they have a name on it, are not necessarily keto friendly or foods that we want you to eat when you're trying to be in nutritional ketosis. But, you know, who would have predicted 5 years ago that there would be so many different products? It's still a mystery to me of who was advising these companies. I tried to get in there a little bit and didn't have any formal way of advising what I thought keto would mean. So, in fact, without any regulation or oversight, a company can just call themselves keto bread and it's very confusing to someone who's new, someone who has come to this through the internet keto, and now you're learning the old school keto before it was called keto method that we teach. So the other interesting things, I was just reviewing videos of other people. I hope you're enjoying those. The Dr. Westman Reacts videos. A very prominent influencer who was just giving a video about red meat and how great red meat was. And I was curious because he led off by saying There are people who are allergic to peanuts. There are people who are allergic to other, nuts, tree nuts, or shellfish, and that he had never met anyone who was allergic to red meat as kind of a testimonial so that why red meat is so great. You're never allergic to it. Well, actually, there is an acquired red meat allergy. But this was a prominent influencer who apparently, I think, has been out of practice, so that never really learned about the red meat allergies that happen. It's called alpha-gal. It's a crossover reaction to a tick bite. It happens in the southeastern U.S., so in my area. So I learned about it several years ago, but it may have been after this influencer had practiced. So what I'm getting at is you will want to talk to people who are still in practice, knowing day to day what the issues are, what new allergies there might be. So fortunately, alpha-gal, this red meat or mammalian meat allergy, fades away over time, but it can be quite serious. So anyway, it was just an interesting, he'd never heard of red meat allergy, that he's not in clinical practice. So when I learned, I remember I got into this because two of my patients did this, and they taught me in the clinical practice, and that still happens today. So you'll want to get information from people who have that kind of clinical practice. I'm getting lots of different types of referrals, although we're known for obesity and diabetes reversal and metabolic syndrome reversal. I had several patients recently come with various types of cancers. And that's been interesting to see because while there are no randomized trials of using the keto diet by itself in humans, there have been a few pilot studies, and Jeff Volek at Ohio State is doing some research and publishing kind of the preliminary studies to show that it's safe to not eat carbs when you have cancer and all, but it's still, the research is in its infancy, if you would call it that. But this one tumor that I really had forgotten about, had to retool, and it is called an anaplastic thyroid carcinoma. And so I'm in the clinic, and I go to PubMed while the person's there, and I type it in, and it turns out there's a Harvard surgeon who has an animal model of this cancer, and he's actually been studying this keto diet, the keto diet that he learned in the context of this cancer. And with a couple studies under the belt, and so animal research, not human, there's a suggestion that the keto diet actually reduced the tumor growth in this very aggressive anaplastic thyroid carcinoma. So with the wonder of the internet, I emailed him, and within a day, he emailed back and said, well, Dr. Westman, my wife went to a meeting, and there were talks about cancer and keto, and so she came back, and I changed, this is Dr. Mez changed what he was doing based on his wife's trip to one of the meetings. And so that's one, kind of a slow way that things change, but this is why we go to meetings and give presentations. And so it turned out that this doctor also has a clinical practice at Harvard and is treating people with these very aggressive tumors. And so I said, it's hard to know if a new treatment is really beneficial unless it takes it away. It's hard to know that you've improved something a little bit with a cancer like this. And the patient that I saw and several patients that he has seen, he sees many more than I do with this type of therapy. It's his hunch that people are living longer based on what the traditional lifespan would be. But it's very difficult to know for sure that is what's happening just with that type of tumor. And another tumor that someone I saw come in had a thymoma. A thymoma is a tumor of the thymus gland, which is here in the neck, and it is a gland that in childhood it helps the white blood cells teach or learn immunity, and it should be gone by the time you're an adult, or it turns into fat tissue. But sometimes it creates a tumor, this thymus gland called a thymoma, and sometimes you get the secretion of a antibody, and that creates myasthenia gravis. So you might have heard of myasthenia gravis. So I'm going to PubMed and I type in keto space thymoma. Why not? I hadn't thought about this, and time passes, and there's actually a case study of using intermittent fasting and a keto diet in someone who has a thymoma. And it was published 4 years ago with a 30 references in the reference list. So I printed it out. I'm reading about it and giving it to the person who has the problem. And so the times change, and to be in a clinical practice where you're in real time having to figure out how to manage somebody and then also how to come up with the new information is really pretty exciting. Why it took 25 years or 50 years that's a whole another story. But the clinic that I'm quite busy and happy being a part of is addressing issues way beyond obesity and diabetes now. And we learn about the benefits of ketosis really year by year. And in the words of Jeff Volek, who's at Ohio State, there's really no evidence that ketosis is harmful. So that took me, with him saying it that concisely, it made me kind of reflect on the fact that, no, there never was a study that said ketosis was harmful. It was just assumed to be that way. And you may, if you're early to this, you might say, of course, it's weird, no one does it. And it's, no, actually, everyone does it. Everyone goes into ketosis if you don't eat for 2 to 3 days. Everyone goes into nutritional ketosis if you don't eat carbs for 2 to 3 days. So actually, looking back with the retrospectoscope for 20 years, when we were first looking at the low-carb diet, it didn't really hit us that, and it really wasn't valued, that there were no studies that said it was bad. You can't find a study, really a prospective study, not association studies. You can't find a clinical trial that has found that the low-carb keto diet is bad, going back, the last 25 years. So our first paper that we published was a review of what was available in 1998 in the literature. There were actually some short-term studies that said low-carb diets were fine. And what I'm trying to get at is that it was prejudice and prejudging. It was being in a dogmatic situation where if you're in the power position saying something is best, whoever else it is has to prove that it's not the best, even though you didn't have data to say that what you had was best. That's the low-fat diet. So the interesting thing is that we're now learning about all the other beneficial effects of ketosis, which if you come talk to me one-on-one, we really have to figure out now, I think, if that incremental benefit or incremental change you would make to be sure you're in ketosis all the time, however difficult that is or easy that is. I'm not sure that you really have to be in ketosis all the time, and I don't recommend that people monitor all the time. But that's out of just kind of I want to develop a simple system that's easy to stick to. There are a lot of people who come to me now with monitors and meters and are quite willing to, in the words of Dr. Boz, to be, keto for life, meaning you're measuring ketones for life. And I think that's a little extreme. However, if you have a cancer, for example, or a serious medical or neurologic condition where that incremental benefit of having ketones around is proven to be useful and helpful, there are people who would take that extra step to measure all the time, although I'm not sure that it's worth it yet. Anyway, these are just the discussions I get into now for folks who've been on a low-carb keto diet for a long time and choose to stay off the carbs. I think that's just fine, as long as we measure everything that has to do with health. And now a lot of discussions are, and I know I've talked about this before, is that cholesterol is not a disease. It's atherosclerosis that is the disease that you want to prevent. And so you can actually get atherosclerosis measured by this is the condition that happens on the arteries, and that's what leads to strokes and heart attacks. So in terms of cardiovascular disease, I'm really going beyond, yes, you can look at triglyceride and HDL in the blood, but we really should be able to have a discussion about whether you have evidence of the disease, and if you don't, why would you be on a medicine to prevent a disease that you don't have? It doesn't matter what the blood levels are. And so I know that's a big change for a lot of people. And I heard today that, one doctor who shares a patient of mine is quite upset that cholesterol level is elevated, even though this person has lost 80 pounds and feels better than she has in the last, I think 20 years. And they're going on a trip to Santorini in Greece, and she's ready to hike up this. She couldn't have done that a year ago. So, what evidence is so strong? No, it's not strong. You'd have to have really strong evidence about a cholesterol level, to tell someone who's had this much benefit to change what they're doing. I mean, it's really kind of shocking that we've trained a whole cohort of doctors to focus on one little thing and think that that's the best and only thing that you can do. That's the other thing that's important to remember. Doctors really are only trained in medication care, not lifestyle. I interviewed Dr. Phil Ovadia recently. I'll have him on and you'll hear him. And he had a couple great comments. One is that, the LDL, it just doesn't do much. So this is a good style for diplomacy training here. You can just acknowledge that LDL matters, but you just kind of dismiss it as, but it doesn't mean much. It doesn't, treating it really doesn't do much, which is really true. We want to focus on the diabetes reversal first, the metabolic syndrome, which is the high triglyceride, get that down, get the HDL up. Incidentally, I had a recent patient come in, his LDL was 120. That's not supposed to happen. And he had started at 80, and now years being on keto, his HDL was 120. The good cholesterol, remember. So all sorts of interesting things to think about instead of just the LDL and being on a drug and all that. I know, despite the firm and even sometimes emotional fear-mongering of doctors about the cholesterol level, you want to get the measurements of your arteries, if at all possible. Measure the pipes. Try to demystify the heart and the body. Think of these as pipes, like pipes in your house. Are there blockages in there? Does the blood or the water flow? And often we just assume, based on your functioning, whether you can do what you want to do, walking and all that you're getting plenty of blood flow to your heart. And in most cases, that's okay. So actually, I've discouraged some people from measuring more about their anatomy or their heart, because in their particular situation, it doesn't matter. So sometimes when you open up Pandora's box, you will feel, and doctors will feel like they have to act on that information. And sometimes it's better to just not know. And of course, that depends on the personality of the person as well. So I wanted to mention that a lot of conversations these days are kind of that's personalized medicine, going to the Mayo Clinic statin decision aid tool. I've had people tell me they've already gone there and they put their information in, and so that's a good place to look. Of course, it gives you the risk and then the reduction of risk with medication treatment on average for people. If you want to just kind of get an idea of how much risk there is and then how much it could be reduced by medication treatment. For some people, that small change that you see there, if it's small, is important and they want to take advantage of everything they can do. Other people are more afraid of having side effects, or they've had side effects before. So we can actually help personalize those decisions. And in my opinion, it's your decision to make, not mine. I don't let a guideline or a well-intentioned yet misguided health practitioner tell you what to do. They're just advisors. And if they can't give you the detail on what the risk is and what the risk reduction is, tell them that, well, I need to get more information. They should be able to say it in general terms, at least. Well, so I had a couple questions in from Lisa. And of course, remember the April 29th, there's a live diabetes lab session at 8 p.m. Be sure to join in then, April 29th, and tell your friends and anyone who has diabetes or pre-diabetes. We go over all those different lab tests, and actually it's kind of the first prelude to opening our diabetes course, which we'll be having available for the first time at the end of this month, early May. So that's pretty exciting. Really excited to have this diabetes course coming out. So let's see. I'm trying to find a Google Doc, and what was it we do without technology? Oh, interesting. I do remember, I don't have the exact words, but the first question had to do with handling carbs and handling carbs differently. Kind of the general is now that you are, carbs are on your radar to keep them lower or avoid eating them to some degree. How does the body handle different kinds of carbs? And our initial teaching is that you focus on the total grams of carbohydrates. The question was, how do you fine tune it beyond that? So is a jelly bean different than a green bean? And well, if you step back, of course it's different. So in the simple sugars and refined carbs, like refined flour and sugar itself, Dr. Atkins used to call them the anti-nutrients. Anti-nutrient meaning you're taking in an energy source, the sugar, the glucose, but you're not taking in any nutrients to metabolize that source of energy. So if you think about it, when you eat meat, you're taking in energy and you're taking in the vitamins and the minerals to metabolize that energy. So the first branch point would be you want to eat the carbs, if you eat carbs, that have also with the energy of the carbohydrate, the vitamins and minerals that help you to metabolize those molecules, those energy molecules. So if you eat a lot of, now one jelly bean is not going to do much damage, I don't think. But if you're thinking, 300 grams of carbs as anti-nutrients, the typical American diet, then that's a big deal. So I think Dr. Atkins had a great point, which was food matters. Food's important. Like you don't put bad gas into your car. So you want to eat great food, and to the extent that you can, eat foods that are full of nutrition that will help you metabolize those foods that you're eating. And, animal sourced products do that for you automatically. Eggs, poultry, fish, shellfish, red meat. So Yeah, the different kinds of carbs are handled differently, and you think of it differently in terms of the nutrition that the carbs will bring. But now, if you look at other ways of measuring carbs, like glycemic index and glycemic load, what we teach is so low on the glycemic index and glycemic load scales that basically you're not eating most of those carbs that are on the glycemic index. And if you're trying to be in nutritional ketosis, you're trying to be maximal fat burning, and the new term really should be, if you're in ketonemia, meaning normal and ketonemia, meaning ketones in the blood, ketonemia, not ketosis, whatever term you want to use. Osis has the implication that it's an abnormal condition, ketosis. So ketonemia is another way to phrase it. That's what Jeff Volek said at a recent meeting. So, but if it's going to be difficult to eat lots of carbs, even above starting to get on this glycemic index scale, because it doesn't take many carbs to create the insulin response that then turns off your ketosis. So the amount of carbs, let's say you're down to the 20 or 30 total grams per day. Let's say 20 total grams per day. Never look at net carbs, just total carbs. Having a jelly bean instead of a green bean probably doesn't matter. I know, isn't that crazy? It probably doesn't matter in the big picture because there's not much of it. Which reminds me, I had another discussion recently with somebody about the seed oil hoopla. You really can't have seed oil. Well, Amy Berger, who co-wrote End Your Carb Confusion, and is our nutritionist at Adapt Your Life Academy, finally kind of put it together where, well, on the diet that we recommend, there's not going to be much seed oil because you're not having all of the products where the seed oils are. So we don't make a big hoopla about avoiding seed oils because there aren't many there at all. So if you're going to have a jelly bean or a green bean, and having one jelly bean doesn't knock you off and spin you into a full relapse back to carb addiction, it probably doesn't matter because of that small amount. So if you're having store-bought dressing that has a little bit of seed oil in it, and it's fascinating to see how that still is percolating through programs that really kind of should know better, but it's still there. So the internet keto doesn't tell you the relative importance of avoiding seed oils and avoiding carbs, having net carbs or total carbs. So the most important thing is watching the total carbs. And when you get it to that low that we recommend, then the seed oils are going to be negligible. And, you'll hear, oh, well, the omega-3 and they're pro-oxidant and all this. And I just can't get too worked up about that until I'm shown evidence that it matters in the context of a program like this. So we've been recommending this kind of program for, 20 years, and Dr. Atkins for 30 years before that. And so the question, I guess getting back to the question about the type of carbohydrate, sure, it matters, but depending on how much of it you have, it may not be very important if you have very little of it. Now, End Your Carb Confusion, going from phase 1 to phase 2, you'll see kind of increases the number of total grams, but really kind of stays to that food, non-starchy foods for the most part, maybe having more of them, maybe having some starchy foods, a little bit of fruit and berries, but that is not the maximal weight loss and nutritional ketosis phase for everyone. And that's why I start out at the phase 1 or under the 20 total grams per day. So again, I don't really want you to worry too much. So if over Easter you had a jelly bean or two, no big deal. If, like me, it took me 10 years to not have jelly beans on Easter, and if I have one jelly bean, I'll eat the whole bag. So you just have to watch yourself and be honest with yourself. Now, 20 years after cutting carbs majorly out of my diet, I can have a jelly bean and stop. I know this kind of true confessions, right? I was at a theme park with my grown children, and one of my kids who had the cotton candy. I hadn't had cotton candy in decades, and so I said, "Oh, let me have some cotton." Oh my gosh, it was like a drug, right? And so it's okay. I had a handle on it. I was among people who wouldn't let me, face plant or get more cotton candy, but it is a drug-like effect. Sugar was regarded as a drug before it was labeled as a generally regarded as safe sort of compound in the early 1900s. And so it's something we do need to be careful of. And so then the next question I think had to do more on that cholesterol line. And let me see if let me check the chat room here. Let's see. And there we go. So the statin tool is called, Carrie, the Mayo Clinic Statin Decision Tool. Yeah, Terry put the link. Thank you. Oh, so the newsletters and videos have been informative. Thanks, John. And then the STEM episode. I said, okay, we'll check that out. Appreciate that. I know. I just looked at it one, and it dropped the one where basically I couldn't find any evidence for these anti-plaque nutrients that are very popular out there. And I think you need to be careful to not respect food or nutrients. I mean, it's a double standard, isn't it? Where, well, that's a drug, then it's all unsafe and you can't have it. But here, have my nutrient that's not been evaluated by the FDA because we don't call it a drug, but it has all of these great effects because it's not a drug. I mean, so you can't play both sides of the coin here. Either you study it and it has effects and you see it and it has side effects. And just because there are no companies that can make the money to do those kinds of studies doesn't mean that it doesn't have bad effects. Our current regulatory system of things that just say they're supplements is very poor. It takes a lot of attention of something being bad before the government will go in and take a look at it. So I don't think, I've never been a big proponent of vitamins, and I know Dr. Atkins was, which was interesting. I didn't really think about studying the vitamins that he was pushing because the diet itself was so strong. And yet when you saw Dr. Atkins, you would end up with, 3 to 5 vitamins that you would then buy as you exited the clinic. A lot of doctors will sell things out of their office, but you want some evidence in humans, and you want enough people in studies so you can know the risks and the benefits of these things. You just don't say there's no risk just because they don't call it a drug. That would be like saying sugar has no risk, right? Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So just a general comment about doctors in general are not aware of the importance of optimizing metabolic health as a solution or adjunct to treating chronic diseases. Yeah, I think that's kind of universally true. I mean, there are more and more doctors but it's still a small percentage. And most will go to a mode of not of prevention, but of reaction. And that has really come true in my discussions about cardiovascular disease, that doctors don't really think about, well, we should do a calcium score to see if you have disease. They're like, well, we'll wait until you have a symptom. In fact, Dr. Ovadia has the language that the calcium score should be viewed kind of like the mammogram of the heart. Mammogram being just kind of a general tool now that all women get, and it's a preventive kind of thing. But the problem with that sort of analogy is if you read Zoe Harcum's work, Zoe is just super smart, independent scientist. Her review of whether she should get a mammogram or not was not very glowing. And I have to say, within the medical world, I remember this as sort of these oncologists are pushing this, and there's a downside there to getting in there and having something that doesn't turn out to be a problem. It's a negative result. The false positives are often not regarded in the equation. You focus on just the people who had true positives of the disease and you save their life. And so anyway, just to call it a mammogram of the heart doesn't mean that it's going to be a great thing, that everyone has a calcium score either. But it's an interesting time when there's a tool that is not really known how to best use it. So let's see, Chris asks, what do you recommend for bringing up a blood sugar while I'm on keto? I'm still needing insulin and once in a while have a low. Well, that's interesting because you won't have a low unless you're on insulin or a drug like any of these other injectables for diabetes or a pill for diabetes, unless you eat carbohydrates. So carbohydrates can make the blood sugar go up. Insulin, your own insulin can go up and you can have an overshoot. That's called reactive hypoglycemia. I'm assuming that's not what's going on in your case, but there's something not right if you're still having low blood sugars, meaning, under 70 and you're feeling it and then you're still needing insulin and having lows, you just get off. So that's like flying an airplane. Here's the ground. That's like flying the airplane and bouncing your airplane as you're coming in for a landing. That's poor form. In fact, I think you'll get kicked out of you can't be a pilot if you do that. So you're on too much insulin. And let us know, let us help, because I'd rather have the blood sugars be a little high than having a low. And so, but back to your question, you never want to take too much sugar to raise your blood sugar. I know some people, my sugar's low, I'm going to eat this, candy bar. No, just a swig of orange juice, 5 grams of carbs will raise your blood sugar and rescue you out of a low blood sugar. And that's 1 or 2 of those glucotabs that are sold specifically for that. Dr. Bernstein, in his book, which is mainly for type 1s, but he harps on this, that you don't want to use, part of the good management of type 1 diabetes is to just rescue yourself with a very small amount of sugar. Don't take in a bunch of sugar that then creates a high blood sugar that then you're going to need more insulin so take just enough to get your blood sugar up. And a swig of orange juice or 1 or 2 glucotabs is typically enough. But it sounds like we need to, it's called deprescribing. Sounds like we need to work on I would rather have you on, I know this sounds radical, but I would rather have you on no insulin at all, knowing that you are making some insulin, that you're type 2, than to risk a low blood sugar. I would rather have you off the insulin and have the blood sugar float up a little bit, as long as they're in the hundreds for milligrams per deciliter, which means like 6 to 8 to 9 in the millimole range. As long as you're in that range, it's okay. Your body's going to keep it there, and then you're not going to risk a low blood sugar. Again, thinking coming in for a landing, blood sugars are going to come down, but you don't want them to go too low. You want to always keep them just a little high while you're fixing the metabolism, which may include weight loss in your case. We get into this in a big way in the diabetes course. So I wrestled with, do we want to give a course where we teach how to self-deprescribing medications? And we don't use that language, but I decided, or our team decided, that we had to have information in this course to help people understand how to handle the medication and to get off medication, because often the doctors don't know how to do it. So the feedback I've had very commonly is we help you, or we would say, go to your doctor, and you come back and say, well, my doctor didn't know what to do. Well, so in this course and in the ALA membership, we will use the language like, well, this is what I would do with my patients. This is what, if you were my patient, I would do this. So it's really not telling you exactly what to do, but you can learn from how we handle our patients. And measuring the blood sugar or the continuous glucose monitor, blood sugar with a finger stick, continuous glucose monitor has really put you in charge of managing the medications and the foods, because the outcome you're controlling, the altitude of the plane coming in for landing is the blood sugar, and you're measuring that in these situations. Another reason I say I don't want you on insulin as long as you're doing a program like this is I've had several patients now whose hemoglobin A1Cs were 12 or 14, which means their blood sugars were 300 all day long. They're type 2s, so they're making enough insulin so their blood sugar doesn't go up to 500 or 600, but the social circumstances and just happenstance occurred so that these people were never put on insulin. They were never put on medication. They were just told to cut the carbs out. And what happened over a period of time, and generally it was weeks, is that they normalized their blood sugars just by changing the food without measuring. They didn't even measure blood sugars, and without using insulin. That's pretty remarkable. And so that's why I have the confidence to say I'd rather have you on no insulin than risk a low blood sugar from the insulin. And let us know how we can help. Let's see. Sue says, John put in the Zoe Harcum breast cancer to screen or not to screen. Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening when, you just focus on the wins, right? The saves. You don't incorporate all the other, the people who get screened who have no problem, or some are concerned even about the possible cancer that it can create by having mammograms. So I don't know. I haven't personally weighed in on that just because it's a tough one. But Zoe Harcum, I think, concluded that she's not going to get a mammogram anymore, and that she's smart, really smart. Thanks, John, for putting that link there. Oh, great, Chris. If you can take the diabetes course, that'd be fantastic. So interesting. The other major topic of discussion in the clinic these days is the drugs, the Ozempic, the Saxenda, the Wegovy, the Zepbound, the what's the others? Oh, Mounjaro. Remember, a low-carb diet, simple. You don't have to buy anything. It's been around, well, as a hunter-gatherer diet for hundreds of thousands of years, as a therapeutic diet in the Western world for obesity treatment, at least since the 1860s, with the Banting diet. There were no shots. Well, I suppose someone recently said, but there was no junk food. And that's a good point. I mean, so if you don't ever come to grips with the fact that food is the problem. So if you're always, I want to have my whatever, that I didn't really see anyone who was trying to quit smoking. That was my former career. No one really said, well, but I just want to have one cigarette. Everyone was pretty convinced that smoking was bad and they needed help getting off the smoking. But now we're at this time where most people don't focus on the food being bad, and that if we didn't have bad food, it would be a lot easier to do a low-carb diet. Well, that's a good point. So, but I wonder if any of you watched the Oprah show. She's doing a series. I only really could stomach the first one. I just realized, okay, she's really shilling. She's pushing the drug companies now, and there was no discussion about food. In fact, best I kind of tried to pay close attention. Food was only mentioned in the context of food noise, and then the medicine cut out the food noise. Well, recently, someone who in the clinic who's following a keto diet watched that show, and she came in and she told me, well, Dr. Westman, that's exactly what happens on the keto diet, is the food noise goes away. And they were talking about it, that it was only the drug that could do it. Well, they never said that, but that was the implication. And that's true. So all of the things that were being talked about that happens for those drugs really happens on a keto diet when it's properly done, when you find, you get over the the keto adaptation, you find foods you like, the food noise goes down, the cravings go away because you're not having those foods anymore. And so it's interesting that when you're, promoting one product, like one car, the drugs for obesity, do you have to mention anything else? I mean, and I see that, if you're on the Chevy floor, you're not going to be told about VWs or other cars. But it's a disservice if Oprah, was so influential, never mentions food. She just talked about, well, actually she did it right at the end. She said, and for all of you who've been able to do this with diet or other exercise or surgery, we love you. And, but it was really the drug is the answer. And even one of the doctors sort of conceded that it was the company's idea to have you on these medicines forever. And that's much like the statin medicine, although it's a different type of medicine, different disease. But if you think about it, it's the bad food that the Ozempic, Mounjaro is treating. It's the bad food that the statin is treating. If you go in that world, that paradigm. And so that's the other thing to remind your doctors, that you're not eating the bad food that creates all the problems that requires you to give the medication. And that's paraphrasing Dr. Lustig up from San Francisco. He said, good food is medicine, but bad food requires medicine, which kind of gives the hook, or gets the doctor off the hook. Well, of course you're prescribing Ozempic and all these medicines because people are eating bad foods and they don't understand they're eating bad foods. The horror or the train wreck that we're bound to see, I'm afraid, and that the obesity doctors are sort of, oh no, not again, is, what happens after weight loss surgery was rolled out 30 years ago, is that when people are not taught about the food, they can regain all of their weight, even though they've had drastic changes to their innards, so they can't eat much. You can always drink sugar, and you can always be addicted to something to eat through or beyond that. Same thing will be true for the medicines. And it's just going to be a matter of time. And anyway, of course, we don't have crystal balls, but there are so many similarities to, well, let's just, use a drug, fix this. Gary Taubes wrote an article with that sort of theme in mind, that 100 years ago, insulin was discovered, and whoa, it's going to fix everything. And now, this semaglutide, GLP-1s are discovered, or liraglutide, the generic names, and it's going to fix everything. Well, Gary is I would say he's not an optimist. He's a realist, and so the drugs aren't the answer, but the effects of a keto diet, for most people, I'll acknowledge not everyone, but for most people, the effect is just like taking one of those drugs. So, it's a choice, or is it a choice? So now most of the doctors in my area will, you want weight loss? Here, go immediately to one of these shots. Well, 10 years ago, they would say, well, you need the weight loss surgery. So kind of in my sort of optimistic, cynical view, it's a little better at least, so that all the doctors aren't just sending people to surgery. Now they're sending them or giving them a medication, but then when that doesn't work, or people can't find it because they have run out of it, it's so massively popular, and even the state of North Carolina has written it off their prescription medicine list because it's costing too much being prescribed, and they don't understand the value that would happen down the road with treating obesity and diabetes. So they've just eliminated it already for those with the state health plan. Even recently, a couple people came in. I mean, all they really wanted from me was the shot. And, I tried to talk about the food. It's really the food. And there was just like, they didn't want to hear it. And yes, someone was shocked to hear me say, yes, I do prescribe the medicines from time to time. It's not my preference. I have a subset of people on phentermine, which is the time-honored drug from the Obesity Medicine Association. It still works. It's still relatively inexpensive. And then for those who have insurance coverage and or are willing to pay for the GLP-1s or the other GIP GLP-1s, that's the Mounjaro and Zepbound, if it's not too much of a hassle to get it and they're willing to pay, in the context of a food program as well, I will passively allow people or prescribe it. Although I don't think I've prescribed Mounjaro or Zepbound yet, but my doctor colleagues who are internal medicine specialists are using those drugs, and I will follow people who come to me on those medicines and on a keto diet. But occasionally it becomes too strong. That, remember, keto has drug-like effect if you're doing a prescription strength keto. So if you're on a medicine that has prescription strength, you're really combining now two medications, and it might cause some side effects that you didn't have before. And that, to my knowledge, that hasn't been studied in a large scale, combining keto with any of these newer shots. So you're going to have to be followed pretty carefully if you're going to do that. What I've been doing recently is I know most of the other obesity medicine doctors in my area. I know the ones who are very promotional of using these shots and other medicines. I typically steer my patients in that direction toward other sources of the medications, just because it's not what I would really want to focus on. And so that might be a surprise to you that not everyone comes to me for the keto diet. That said, I've had people travel a long distance to come to just talk about the keto diet. So my practice has a wide range. In fact, some people have never heard of the keto diet, and I have to kind of explain what it is. I have a poster on the wall that shows all the foods that you can have. And by the end of the one meeting, I usually can persuade someone to at least give it a try, the simple system that we've developed. Let me just check. Wow, I really have become a professor where I can just talk and talk and talk. Let's see. Pat, do you know what the Go Low oral medicine is? I don't. So Go Low is out there, GOLO. I see, I do, yeah, I watch TV from time to time, and these ads are there, and Go Low, I think what it is, yeah, and it's kind of ingenious. I think it's a supplement that doesn't do much, but it's combined with a low-carb diet. And so someone purchased that and brought it in, and it was some time ago. I didn't keep it, but I looked at it. So it looks like they're basically getting page 4 and this supplement. And so we've seen this time and time again where someone gives an HCG shot with a diet plan that's 400 calories per day, and they think that the HCG shot was what worked, when really it was just the combination. It was the food change that made it work. That 400 calorie diet is super low in calories. So I think it may be that idea where it's not the supplement that's doing the work, it's the list of foods. I've seen this with another company that sells a breath meter that measures ketones. That's not the measurement of ketones that makes it work. She combines a list of foods, much like page 4 or phase 1 of the Go End Your Carb Confusion, combines it with a meter, and it's very effective because people have that immediate feedback. So if anyone does come across what is in the Go Low product, then let us know. I suppose I can just buy it, right? Let's see, John, I spoke to a doctor at the Australian Pathology Lab recently who believes you can only reverse pre-diabetes and not diabetes. He couldn't understand why I wanted to use a CGM to find out what is happening to my blood glucose and possible causes. He knew blood glucose goes up after food, but wasn't troubled. It seemed to have no appreciation of knowing about what is happening to blood insulin. Yeah, Google Dr. Kraft for more info. So Dr. Kraft, years ago was testing thousands of people looking at the blood glucose and insulin response, and some people have a very high insulin response to keep the glucose relatively low. And so, I have to imagine that doctor either is older or in a system where there are all these guidelines and they've basically been dumbed down to, measure cholesterol and treat it like a disease. And they don't think food matters, like going to the petrol station, the gas station. Just get junk gas, put it in there. Who cares? No, we wouldn't treat our cars like this, and we don't treat our animals, our pets like this. So I'm not surprised that most doctors just don't know about it or haven't been trained in this kind of this way. Now, I don't know that you really need to worry about your blood glucose, John. If you just stay away from the carbs, you'll be fine. Now, I say that because that was my experience when I was kind of self-shamed into wearing a continuous glucose monitor, because two young doctors came to my office and they had worn them for years. And so I said, okay, I'll go get one. And I wore one for a month. Typically they last 2 weeks. So it was 2 of them. And by the end of the month, I was testing, can I have this? Can I have that? And my blood sugar ended up being higher at the end of the month using the CGM than at the beginning, because I was trying to see what I could get away with, right? So if you just stay to the list of foods, you'll get great results. Now, I've seen, and I'm going to be reviewing some work where the combination of food, when you have it, what the order of food that you have might mitigate the glucose response. But like you said, Dr. Kraft's information tells us that just measuring the glucose doesn't tell the whole story. You might have had to have a huge increase in insulin to keep the blood glucose down. And it's that blood sugar times the insulin, that number, which is a proxy or the relative amount of how much damage is going on. So just because your blood sugar doesn't go up, if the insulin goes up, we don't think that's a good thing. So, but even in the U.S., not many people, not many doctors are having patients come to them with asking for CGMs, and very few will pay out of $100 out of pocket to get that kind of information, because they don't know what to do with it, or they don't understand that carb insulin process that's going on. So, well, thanks again and for listening in and the questions, and thanks for watching on the replay. Hope you have a wonderful, it's a spring here. We are in North Carolina. We're inundated with pollen. If you've never lived in an area with lots of pine trees, we have this yellow haze and yellow on all the cars and in the house. And anyway, we'll be out of that. It's usually about a month of that and into summer in North Carolina pretty soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next month. See you on the inside.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.